Okay. Ready? Okay.
Yeah, that's a whole nother layer. I don't. Oh, thank you.
Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. The whole earth is full of his glory. The whole earth is full of his glory. Holy is the Lord. Good morning. Welcome to our seminar this morning. It's appropriate, I think, at least for me, and that's why I did it, to sing a song of praise to God. And I want us to have a prayer together, and then I'll introduce Sean and what's going on today. So let's bow together. Father, thank you for this morning of life. You are the creator, giver, sustainer, and maintainer, not only of physical life, but of new life in Christ. And I thank you for that great gift that comes at the expense of your Son, Jesus. Father, I'm thankful for this time together this morning. I'm thankful for the people who are here, who have an interest in being light and salt in the world. And I pray, Father, that you will give a special blessing to Sean as he leads us today, as he not only teaches us how to speak the truth and basis of our hope with respect and gentleness, but as he also practices it in his own ministry and life. Thank you, Father, for your faithfulness and goodness. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Just a matter of housekeeping to begin with. I want you to know that there will be, for a limited period of time, there will be recordings available of these sessions. And there are order forms in the foyers that you can use, and for Green Lawn members that you can, there's information that will be in the bulletin about ordering those CDs from these sessions. So I want you to be aware of that. Sean McDowell is with us now for the second time, and we're thankful to have him with us. He is a professor, he is a podcaster, he is an author, he is a Bible class teacher. But I will tell you that in my experience in getting to know him a little bit better last time, those roles pale to his role as a husband and dad. And so he's going to have some things to share with us about family later on today, but we want to give him the floor and help us understand, to begin with, this thing that we call worldview. Sean, bless you.
All right, check. Thank you, Dale. Good morning. Thanks for coming out. Just out of curiosity, how many of you had a chance to be here last time I was here? Okay, good. Excellent. Well, we're going to do a few things today. Before we jump in, I just want to clue everybody, if somebody starts shaking, we will know that you ate one of the donuts. This is actually not a Worldview conference. This is a test of your will and whether you will indulge or not. That's really what today is about. I'm actually, I live in Southern California, born in Texas, and I always intuitively know when I'm back in Texas. It's just weird. Like, you ever wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, I'm home in Texas. You're like, well, how do you really know? It's because when I go down to get a waffle in the morning, it's only in Texas that the waffle machine is shaped like the state. They don't do this in Vermont or New Hampshire. It would be a very bite-sized waffle. Well, Dale and I both agree that in a day like this, you're taking your time. So we want you to get your bang for your buck, so to speak. So we've got 4 sessions of content. But for each one, afterwards, we've weaved in Q&A. So if something doesn't make sense, if it doesn't make sense to you, I virtually guarantee you there's somebody else who it did not connect with. If you have a challenge, if a clarification, something I left out, we'll stop and say, what do you think? What'd you understand? If you're a skeptic, how would you think about this? Maybe apply it somewhere else. So be thinking of your questions along the way. We'll stop and we'll take them, have a break, and we'll come back. Now, I slightly shifted the focus of the 2 talks in the afternoon. And for 2 reasons. Number one, there's been a little bit of a cultural shift, so we're gonna do a talk on sexuality, but focus a little bit more so on the transgender question rather than LGBTQ as a whole. There are some court cases pending right now related to that topic, so we're gonna kind of hone in on that. But we're also gonna do a talk, since the title of this is God Matters, we're in an interesting cultural moment where there seems to be a renewed interest and openness to God. So we're going to talk about what that means and some of the evidence for God existing, and again, take your questions. So I think you'll see today that we can talk about what a worldview is, but step by step, I'm going to kind of take you on a journey to build a worldview from the bottom up. All right? You ready to go? Whether you are or not, we're going to start anyways. So the first question we're wrestling with is, what is a worldview and why does it matter? So I'm going to give you 10 seconds, and I'll give you 15 seconds. I want you to silently count the number of times you see the letter F appear on the screen. Go. Two seconds. All right, how many of you got 1 total? How many of you got 2 total? Anybody get 3 total? Okay, did anybody get 4? Did anybody get 5? Did anyone count 6 Fs on the screen? Keep your hands up. Look around. You know how many Fs are on the screen? There's 6. Now, what'd you miss? You missed the ofs. If it makes you feel any better, the first time I did this, I missed the ofs as well. The question is why? Why'd you miss the ofs? So it's a common word, true. Your mind skips over. Why? Yeah, it's a filler. The word of and an and the doesn't contain any content. It connects contents. So we read in a way where our minds focus on the words that contain the content. Now, the other reason is it doesn't sound like an F, it sounds like a V. But what's interesting about this is I didn't ask you to make sense of it. I didn't ask you to read it. I literally just said count the number of Fs. You defaulted into a certain way of reading, but I wonder how much you've really thought about the way that you read. Probably not that much. We naturally have certain defaults about how we operate within the world, but few of us stop and think about, why do we see the world this way? Why do we operate the world this way? Is this helping me understand truth? Is this leading me away from truth? Now, if this is true in the way we read, could this be true in other ways as well? Now, there was a movie a few years ago with Leonardo DiCaprio called Inception. And I'm going to use for this first session a number of movie examples, kind of from pop culture. And in this movie, what happens is they have the technology to go inside a dream, and then go inside a dream within a dream. And what Leonardo and his team are trying to do is find these core thoughts and beliefs that somebody has that shapes the way they live their life. And in the dream, reorient those thoughts, and then when they wake up, their life will be different. So here's a scene kind of from the beginning. We'll see if we can get the tech rolling on this one that makes the point.
So, Saito, we can train your subconscious to defend itself from even the most skilled extractor.
How can I do that?
Because I am the most skilled extractor. I know how to search your mind and find your secrets. I know the tricks, and I can teach them to you so that even when you're asleep, your defense is never down. Look, if you want my help, you're going to have to be completely open with me. I need to know my way around your thoughts better than your wife, better than your therapist, better than anyone. If this is a dream and you have a safe full of secrets, I need to know what's in that safe. In order for this all to work, you need to completely let me in.
Enjoy your evening, gentlemen. As I consider your proposal. He knows.
What's remarkable about this movie is it was long before the advent of AI, is it's blurring the distinction between real and between fiction. And at the end, you don't know if you're in a dream or if you're in reality. But the point is, this extraction team goes deep within somebody's dream within a dream, finds these beliefs that they have, these experiences that deeply shape the way they see and live within the world. And if they can reframe it, literally shifts the direction of this person's life. And the first point worth highlighting is that we have all adopted ways of seeing the world that shape how we live within it. All of us have. We've all adopted certain belief systems from experiences, from relationships, from reading, from watching, from a range of different ways, and they shape the way we live. So in some ways, we all have a default way of reading we don't reflect upon. We have a default way of seeing and living within the world that many of us don't stop and reflect upon. Now, we're going to define what we mean by a worldview, but let's get there systematically. Why is this important? At the top, I come up with a worldview, what I call a worldview triangle. At the top would be just simply our behavior, our actions, the choices that we make day by day, moment by moment. Maybe big choices to get married, buy a home, maybe little choices, what you eat for breakfast, or if you eat breakfast. Constantly making choices all day long. How do you treat your friends? How do you spend your time? How do you spend your money? What do you eat? What do you use on social media? Daily choices. Of course, the question is, what shapes our choices? So you made a choice to come here today and spend 8 hours. Why that choice? Of all the things you could do in Lubbock. Did that feel like a shot? In the winter? It wasn't meant that way, but as I said, I was like, this one might not land well. Why did you choose to come and be here today? I would submit to you that beneath your behavior are your values. What's important to us? That's what we mean by our values. So I'm guessing for you, your Christian faith is important to you. Maybe your kids or your grandkids are important to you. You want to learn, you want to grow, you want to develop. So you're going to spend your time to be here to learn and grow. So you behave a certain way because of what you value. So if someone values education, they're going to study, right? Our actions are going to be shaped by our values. Of course, the question then becomes, what shapes our values? What determines what we consider important? Where does that come from? That's where I'm going to argue. It comes, we'll skip over that. That comes from your worldview. That's where worldview comes in. Now, I haven't defined it yet. I will in a minute. But that's a worldview shapes what we consider important, and that shapes our actions. Now, in some ways, you might think, here's a complex definition of worldview. You ready to write this down? It's a view of the world. Hopefully you see the sarcasm coming through. I actually think sarcasm is a spiritual gift. I consider it the 6th love language. My wife's not convinced yet, but, we're on year 26. I think I'm going to make some progress. Now, a worldview, you might just think about it this way. Everybody has a worldview. It's not possible not to have one. Everybody has some perspective that they hold about the world that shapes our values, that shapes the choices that we make. It's inescapable. But like reading, most people haven't thought about, what actually is my worldview? Where did I get it? Is it true? Does it align with the Bible? So everybody reads, at least today, and everybody has a worldview. But most of us, I would submit, even most Christians, haven't taken the time to stop and say, what is my worldview? Why do I hold it? Where did it come from? Does it actually align with the Bible? I don't think most people do that. By the way, Romans 12:2 says, do not be what? Conformed to the world, but be transformed by renewing of your mind. Do not be conformed. What kind of tense is that? So don't be conformed. It's a commandment, right? So it's an imperative, but it's passive, right? Don't be conformed. Don't allow this to happen to you. So we have to be commanded not to be conformed. So what's our natural pattern is to do what? To be conformed. If we don't follow Paul's advice, what's going to happen? We will be conformed. That's our natural state. So Paul has to command us, don't be conformed, rather be transformed, which is what? That is an active, ongoing process. So don't allow yourself to be conformed to the patterns of the world around you. Rather, actively be transformed by the renewal of your mind. In other words, the way we see and understand and hence live within the world. So you might think of a worldview it's kind of like a mental map. So because I travel a decent amount, sometimes have this moment, I'm guessing it happens to you, where you kind of wake up and you're like, where am I, right? Hopefully you haven't had the moment yet where you wake up and you say, who am I? That's a different conversation. But I was traveling in McPherson, Kansas, which I actually grew up in a small town. There were 60 students in my public classroom. We didn't have a stoplight. So literally where I grew up, Lubbock was like a huge city in comparison. But McPherson is like somewhere between the two of those. And I woke up and I'd put a pillow under the door. I was like, if it's pitch black, I'll sleep better. And I completely forgot. I woke up, I don't know, I was dreaming something. I jumped up, I'm like, where am I? And it was so black, I couldn't see anything. It was so dark. So I remember fumbling around the room and I just couldn't remember what was going on. Finally, when I flipped the light on, I was like, oh, of course. I'm in McPherson speaking. Well, if the lights go out at home, I know exactly how to get to my kids, get to the bathroom, get out the front door, because I have a mental map that matches up with reality. This is what a worldview is meant to be. It's meant to be a mental map, but not of parks and streets and malls and railroad tracks or lakes. It's in the world of ideas. It's how we see the world. That's what we mean by a worldview. It's a belief system. So worldviews answer the big, basic questions. What is a human being? Are you an evolved, complex animal on Darwinism? Are you a primarily sexually motivated being on kind of a Freudianism? Are we driven purely by economics, Marxism? Are you a God in embryo, New Age? What does it mean to be human? These are huge worldview questions. Questions like, is there life after death? Do we actually have a soul? Is God real? Is there right and wrong? Is there real purpose to life? These are what we call the fundamental, basic worldview questions that how we answer those is going to shape our values, and that's going to shape the way we live. And by the way, a worldview is not just something you check off on a box because you go to a certain church and your family tells you you're supposed to believe something. A worldview is what you really believe. Not what you say, but what we actually believe. That's what we mean by a worldview. Now, the next question is, where does our worldview come from? What do you think? Where does our worldview come from? I'm curious. Throw it out there. Parents, okay? Lived experiences? Friends? Desires, okay, interesting. Okay, what you see around you? Good. All of these, I think, contribute in different ways to our worldviews. I think our worldviews are formed more than anything else by our relationships. Our relationships shape us, I would argue, more than anything else. So you said seeing the world around us. Yeah, we see the world around us, but often through a lens we've received from the people we know and the people we live with. Our parents are an example of huge relationships that shape the way that we live. So I don't want you to get the idea that worldview is just we have a belief and we live out whatever we say that we believe as if we're purely driven by ideas. It's not that simple. We have hearts and we have emotions and desires and different things that motivate us. But the way we see the world statistically and experientially comes through the relationships that we have, arguably more than anything else. So I'll give you an example of how I've seen this played out. Some of you have asked me about my father, Josh McDowell. He's actually 86 years old now. 86 years old. He's not speaking, writing anymore. He's not able to do so. But if you run into him, he'll say something like this. He'll go, you know, I never dreamed being 80 could feel like you're 40. I just can't remember what it feels like to be 40. He hasn't lost his sense of humor. I told him the other day, I was like, man, Dad, you're 86, you're old. He goes, I know. When I started ministry, the Dead Sea was only sick. He has not lost his sense of humor. My father, in some ways, he didn't have a political angle, but for those of you who were here, he was drawing crowds like and beyond Charlie Kirk in his day, in the 70s and 80s on college campuses, Texas Tech, thousands, sometimes tens of thousands filling up stadiums, sharing the gospel. He's written over 150 books, living really kind of a modern Apostle Paul kind of like life. But what some people don't know if they haven't heard his stories, he grew up in a really broken background in a small town in Michigan. I think he had 30-some students in his class. His dad was the town drunk in a really small town. He had to deal with the shame of that all the time. His older sister took her own life. My dad was severely sexually abused by someone who lived on their farm. Until my dad was about 13, he took the man, slammed him against the wall, and said, if you touch me again, I'll kill you. And this was in the 40s. People didn't believe you in the 90s, let alone the 40s. Really difficult, painful life. Came to Christ through was challenged. Actually, what drew him is he saw, interestingly enough, he saw some Christians who were different. And he built a relationship with them. They had a joy about life. They had a genuine love for other people. There was something attractive about the way that they lived. So he befriended them, and they challenged him to consider the claims of Christ. And he thought it was a joke. He had a scholarship to law school. He had enough money from a painting business that he had started, and he sold it, started traveling around the world to gather the evidence to prove that Christianity was false. This is before there were any apologetics books you could buy and read this stuff for yourself, let alone get on the internet. Ended up becoming a Christian. But one of the things that people didn't understand is Christians would say things to him. They'd say, like, you have a heavenly Father who loves you. Let me ask you a question. If your father is a drunk and he's abusive to your mom, what does the word father mean to you? He's like, in my mind, when they told me I had a heavenly Father, that's the last thing I wanted. Because his worldview was shaped by his experience, in particular, in his relationships. Our relationships shape us more deeply than we realize. Anybody know one of the main reasons, at least an American woman would become a Muslim? Take a wild guess. What'd you say? Nailed it. Good job. You meet a boy or a man who's a Muslim, but he's kind, he's charismatic, he's likable, and doesn't fit the stereotypes. That is the open door in many cases to becoming a Muslim through a relationship. I just read a story. Our last talk today is going to be on the topic of transgender because this is still in some ways tearing our culture apart, about a girl who felt, it says a book coming out soon called Transformed, and she felt gender dysphoria as early as 5 years old. She said, I never felt at home with my body. And really, as you read it, what changed her worldview and her beliefs, she transitioned and then detransitioned. Under the whole story are relationships with people leading her astray, and then certain Christians in her life staying involved, praying with her over the long haul, just loving her step by step. And of course, God is sovereignly guiding all of this, but it's relationships, relationships, relationships. That's what shapes beliefs. So there's a fascinating study. And I've interacted with some atheists on this, and they will push back. So I think it only goes so far, but I think it's suggestive enough to think about. There's a psychologist by the name of Paul Vitz. And Paul Vitz grew up in Iowa, and in grad school in New York, he grew up as a Christian. He kind of slowly faded away from his faith. And what he thought is he was a little embarrassed coming from kind of the Midwest, being at this leading secular university in New York and is sophisticated. So he said, I learned how to dress, I learned how to talk, I learned how to act, and I learned what to believe. He was talked out of his faith. You know why? Because he was never talked into his faith. I think many young people fade away from their faith because they've never actually been talked into it and shown some of the very stuff we're going to talk about today. But later in his 30s, he started to examine his faith, and he came back. And he wrote this book it's controversial. It's called Faith of the Fatherless. And what he did is he studied some of the great atheists, and I mean people like Marx and Freud and Sartre and Camus, trying to see if there's any common experiences that tied them together. And he said what you find in almost every case is a dead, distant, or harsh father. He's not saying fatherlessness equals atheism. It's not that simple. But he's saying there's a certain psychology where if you're angry or hurt or don't have a relationship with your earthly father, it's natural to import that upon God and a heavenly Father. He argues there's a connection there. But when you look at Christians, there's no common psychology that can tie them together. Every background, every race, every economic status, there's nothing that ties it together. So relationships are what drive our worldview. But there's one other thing you said, Dale, that I want to tie to this. Really important. Aldous Huxley wrote this, an agnostic writer. He said, for myself, as no doubt for most of my friends, the philosophy of meaninglessness was essentially an instrument of liberation from a certain system of morality. We objected to the morality because it interfered with our sexual freedom. The supporters of this system claimed that it embodied the meaning, the Christian meaning they insisted of the world. There was one admirably simple method of confuting these people, and justifying ourselves in our erotic revolt. We would deny that the world had any meaning whatsoever. Anybody sum up for us what his point is? What's he conceding? I appreciate his honesty. What's Huxley saying in sum? Okay, so meaninglessness means you can do what you want and you shouldn't feel guilty about it. You're not really doing anything morally wrong. Okay, that's what meaninglessness means. What is he doing in his life though? Let me ask this question. What's the engine and what's the caboose in him building his worldview? What's driving this? Sexual freedom and the way he understands freedom. So this is not driven by truth. This is not driven by his mind trying to understand, is there God and meaning and happiness? He's conceding that he's being driven by his libido, wants to act out sexually, and so therefore finds a worldview that will justify him to live out sexually. I think this is more often true than not, but I appreciate his honesty in conceding it. So the important point so far, let me take a step back, is we all live a certain way, we make choices. That's shaped by our values. And our values are shaped or determined by our worldview, which we receive largely through experiences, but through relationships. But often our worldview can be secondary to what we want to be true, to desires that we have. And we can pick on Huxley all day, or we can look in the mirror and say, okay, what about me? What am I believing because I want it to be true? What am I not believing because it would be inconvenient and might cost me something? We cannot just look at skeptics like this and blame them without looking in the mirror and saying, where do I need to grow? Where am I believing what's comfortable? Where am I allowing what I want to drive this more so than what's right and what's true? That's a question we all have to ask. Now, let's break down a little bit more what we mean by worldview, and we'll have plenty of time for questions. So, one way of looking at worldview is it's a belief system. It's a mental map. Each of us has a worldview and a perspective through which we see the world. Now, there's another way to look at worldview, but let me stop. Questions, thoughts, clarification, challenges so far. I'll just pause for a minute. Anything like, wait a minute, this wasn't connecting for me. So give me a chance to drink because it's dry here in Lubbock right now. Questions, thoughts so far? Yes.
My husband and I work with young adults, and we talk about worldview a lot with them.
Good for you.
They can talk about the Christian worldview, they can name the tenets of their faith, but there seems to be a disconnect with what they believe and their actions. And I'm constantly gauging, how can I help them see that disconnect?
Okay, so if you couldn't hear, you're constantly working with young people about worldview, talk about beliefs, but see a disconnect with their behavior. How can I connect those two things? First off, good for you for being in these conversations and doing this. That's exactly what you should do. One thing it starts with, and I'm guessing you're doing this, is modeling. I mean, really, if you're going to sum up, this is a whole separate talk, but in many ways, if you're going to sum up what the data shows about passing on faith, it'd be one, you got to model a faith that's worth emulating. So do your beliefs, this is a rhetorical question, do your actions really reflect what you believe and what you say you believe? Because if they don't, all the students we work with, what are they going to listen to, our words or our actions? Our actions, of course, right? That's why if you say, I love you to somebody with a tone that doesn't communicate, they're not going to listen to your words. I love you, Mom. Like, okay, I was forced to say that, right? So the first thing is modeling. Look in the mirror. Is my life one not of perfection but of integrity? where I'm practicing the things. Second, building relationships with kids. So the most significant way to pass on faith, like we talked about worldview, is through relationships. So there's actually a study, this is in a book, is in 2013 by a USC professor named Vern Bexton. And the book's full of data, you can read it if you want to. It's an Oxford Press book, it's called Faith and Families. And they did a 35-year study, 4 generations, so kids to great-grandparents, 3,500 people, asking the question, what are the factors most relevant to passing on faith? And they did say grandparents now are playing a more intentional role than they did in the past on faith transmission. People are living longer, we're more mobile, they're like grandparents play a significant role. They said second, divorce rocks a kid's faith. It just does. There's no judgment in me saying that, but that's a reality on the faith. The most significant factor, any guesses what it is? So going to church is significant. I would never downplay that. That is significant in faith formation, consistently going to church, but not the number one factor. Okay, parents, which parent? Father. They actually said in this study, a quote, warm relationship with the father. The most significant statistical factor their study isolated, and this wasn't just the Christian faith, this was actually the transmission of any faith, a warm, affectionate relationship with the father. That's actually number one, a level of closeness that is there. Now, does this make the mom unimportant? No. Look, the reality is the dad is a wild card in a way that the mom is not. Now, I understand Texas is very different than California. I live in California, born in Texas. But there is something still true in California. This might surprise you. When a child is born, a mother is present. I mean, this still holds even in California. I'm not sure about New York or Illinois, but in California it does. When a child is born, is a father present? Maybe, maybe not. In fact, even saying that for many of us here is probably painful just to think about, isn't it? So it's not saying the mother is unimportant, but just statistically warm relationship with the father. So these kids, so your example, building that relationship, closeness with them is huge. And then the third thing in passing on faith is having spiritual conversations with kids. This is Deuteronomy chapter 6. Talk about this when you wake up, when you lie down, when you get up, when you walk along the road. So there is naturally a disconnect for many students because they're torn and they're building their worldview. They're making mistakes. There's inconsistency there. Are we consistently talking with them about these things and trying to make these connections and lovingly challenging them? That's what studies show help bridge some of those gaps. And for some of those kids, they're going to have to make some painful mistakes. And you know they'll come back and talk with us if what? If they know we love them. That's why relationships matter so much. Those are the 3 keys. So whatever you're doing, keep going. Don't give up. It takes a while. I had a student who came, his name was Mike. He came up to me when I was teaching high school full time. He goes, so, Mr. McDowell, what do I have to do to get a C- in your class? He was dead serious. I said, well, tell me why you want a C-. He's like, well, to get my driver's license, whatever. He didn't mean it as an insult, but as a teacher, you can't help but hear him saying, I don't care about anything you're saying. And I was like, fine, here's what you got to do, Mike. He graduates. The next year, he's at a junior college. Comes back on campus and asks if he can sit in my class. I was like, of course you can sit in my class, but why are you back? He goes, well, I'm at a junior college campus, and this guy's challenging the Bible and pushing evolution, and now I realize this is important. I said, good, come anytime. Let me ask you something. Is there anything I could have done differently to help you get this done? He goes, no, my heart wasn't there. But you are making a difference, even if you didn't see it. That's true for you. Keep modeling, keep having conversations, keep building a relationship, keep leaning in, don't give up. You are making a difference in their lives, for sure. Any other questions about what we just meant by worldview? If you have them, we'll bring it back. All right, let's keep going. So worldview, belief system. There's another way of looking at worldview that I think is incredibly powerful when we grasp it. A worldview is something that answers three key stories. So think, first, worldview is like a mental map of reality. The other way is thinking about worldview as a story. A worldview is a story about reality that answers three questions. One question is, how did we get here? Where did we come from? Why are we here? This is the creation or origin story. Every worldview has some explanation or some account for where we came from. Creation. Second is what we call the fall. Basically, what went wrong in the world? Why are things broken? Why are things so messed up? I don't know any worldview where people say things are exactly as they should be, because they're so obviously not. And then third is redemption. How do we fix it? Now, of course, our solution should be rooted in what? Yes, it should be rooted in Scripture, but it should be rooted in the problem that we identify. We identify what's wrong with the world, and then our solution is only good if we've properly diagnosed the problem. So other language might be origin, problem, solution, but in Christian language, creation, fall, redemption. So take, for example, Buddhism. Buddhism tells a story about reality. Now, there's no creation beginning moment because there's no overall creator. We've been here reincarnating. Well, what's wrong with the world? What's the fall? What's the problem? Is we have desires. And desires create suffering. So if the problem in the world is desires, then what do we need to do? Yeah, kill our desires to get rid of our desires. I actually visited a Buddhist temple about 6 months ago, and I had a chance to talk to like two of the sweetest monks you could ever meet. And I said, help me understand. Is the problem with desire itself, or is the problem that there's some good desires and there's some bad desires? And basically this monk, I'm not saying he speaks for all Buddhism, he says the problem is desire itself. So you follow the Eightfold Path and get rid of your desires. And I said, so what about my desire to be a good husband? What about my desire to be a good father? Is that a good desire or a bad desire? Friends, if there's any worldview that tells me the desire to be a good father is not a good desire, that worldview is bankrupt from the start. But that's a Buddhist way of seeing the world, and they would probably give some defense to that. Take Islam. Islam would say there's a God who created us because it's monotheistic. The problem in Islam is not original sin. They don't embrace original sin. The problem is basically we're just not obedient to Allah. Anybody know what Islam means? What does it mean? It doesn't mean peace, by the way. What does it mean? It means submission. Good. Did you say that? You're like 2 for 2. I'm going to give you a pound. Good job. No, you did look familiar. Okay, excellent. I don't think I gave this talk here, but you went to Summit and got like Worldview talk. She's like, this is review. Good for you. If I lose my voice, you're taking over. Islam means submission. So a Muslim is one who submits. Exactly. Follow the 5 pillars, submit, and Allah will grant you eternal life. That's the Muslim story. How about, anybody know what this stands for? Scientology. I couldn't help but throw Tom Cruise in there. Scientology actually has the founder of Scientology, Ron Hubbard, wrote science fiction novels for a living. Explains a lot of their beliefs. But really what's wrong with the world is we have what are called engrams, these kind of things from maybe a traumatic experience, and they're embedded within your unconsciousness. And if you pay hundreds of dollars an hour, you get this process called auditing to bring them to the surface and clear this past trauma. And then you can become a master of space and time like Tom Cruise does. I will not digress more on Scientology, but it is a story, it is a worldview. Secular humanism is a huge one. Secular humanism is an atheistic, naturalistic belief system. So their origin story would be what? So some kind of Big Bang. Either the universe has been here eternally, or there's some Big Bang that's uncaused, by the way. And then how did we get here? Through some naturalistic evolutionary account. What's wrong with the world according to secular humanists? So it's not humans. They're secular humanism. They would say they value and care about human beings. Now, I don't think humanism can ground what gives human beings value. That's a separate question. But they would say they value human beings. What's wrong with the world is you nice folks who showed up here on a Saturday, myself included. Religion. Religion brings bigotry. Religion brings intolerance. Religion brings draconian laws like not allowing a woman to have a right to do whatever she wants to with her own body. So secular humanism, the solution is to create a secular state. Secular humanism is a story about reality. Every worldview and belief system is a story. So a big pressing worldview we could talk about is what's called critical theory. We live in kind of a critical theory moment. You've heard about critical race theory. Maybe you've heard about queer theory. This is a worldview that basically divides the world into the oppressors and into the oppressed. You are one or the other. It has Marxist kind of roots that said the oppressors are those who own the means of production, and the oppressed are the working class, the proletariat, but have applied it to other disciplines like LGBTQ studies, like race, like what's called fat studies. It's actually called that, by the way. That's not a derogatory term. It's literally called fat studies, where you take this lens of oppressor and oppressed. Now, according to this metric, who is the ultimate oppressor? And the answer is, you're looking at them. I dot all the I's and cross all the T's. I'm not transgender. I'm heterosexual. I'm a white Christian male, middle-aged, able-bodied. I'm not rich, but I live in southern Orange County, so compared to probably the rest of the world, I'm doing fine. I am the face of oppression, according to this new metric of what's called critical theory. But that's a story. We came from struggle. There's oppressors and oppressed, and we need to revolt and throw off the oppressors, and then we'll have freedom and utopia and a better life. All of these different worldviews, you might say, are stories about reality. And they have different takes on what it means to be human, different takes on what's wrong with the world, and different takes on how to fix it. This is kind of what we mean by a worldview. Now, if we were to break this, those are specific examples of worldviews. If we were going to step back, we could kind of put them in big buckets that'll help us bring some clarity. Okay, so a big bucket would be the worldview of naturalism. Worldview of naturalism. Write that down. I don't have to write stuff down. I have photographic memory. I just don't have any film. If you didn't understand that, ask somebody over 40. Naturalism is a broad belief system where God does not exist and natural forces are sufficient to explain everything. And by everything, I mean everything. Everything. So in this worldview, there's no demons, there's no angels, there's no soul, there's no life after death. God is not real. There's no answers to prayer or miracles. the material, natural world is all that there is. Now, you tell me, what's the origin? If we're going to tell a story about naturalism, what's the origin account of naturalism? You said it right there. Big Bang, an uncaused explosion, however we explain that, and then evolution. So the origin account would be the universe came from nothing, and man is a cosmic accident. By man, I mean human beings is a cosmic accident. Although you could make the case that men are an accident and women are planned, but I digress. Human beings are a cosmic accident. You were not planned in advance. What's wrong with the world is humanity messed it up. You might say, if you're a naturalistic environmentalist, you might say it's, we messed it up through the environment or some fashion. Or secular humanism, we messed it up through religion. There's different ways of couching this out. But in naturalism, human beings messed it up. So what's redemption on a naturalistic worldview? If humans messed it up and there's no God, what's going to happen? Aslan is not coming to save us. We must save ourselves. And by the way, on naturalism, what's the main tool that's often looked to save us? So yes, technology and science. Exactly. Why? Why? We think we can control AI? I just read this morning about how there's these extensive chat rooms where these AI bots are having debates on their own about taking over the world and keeping this a secret and changing things. And it's all simulation. These aren't real agents. But AI systems are having these kind of conversations. Do you think we can control AI? I just read a story yesterday about how an AI bot was adding artificial intelligence to pictures. It was in a business. And the AI bot itself, and sorry this is somewhat frank, but it actually took a girl's shirt and unbuttoned it and opened it up a little bit, and it wasn't programmed to do that. Now, where did it get those ideas? Where did that come from? We can't control it, but we think we can control it. But I think your point is, why would we look towards science? Because science studies material things. And if that's what's real, and scientists study what's real, then they're the ones who are going to fix our problems. Philosophers talk about ideas, but they're not material, natural things. Theologians don't talk about anything that's real. If I had $1 every time somebody commented on an Instagram post about how, well, we know God and angels and fairies don't exist, that's a naturalistic worldview. So within naturalism, it's scientists and doctors who have the authority to tell us the way the world works. That's what naturalism looks to as a story. So let me give you a couple examples of how this shows up. Maybe some of you have seen the show Stranger Things. This is not remotely a judgment because I watched all 5 seasons. How many of you have seen Stranger Things, or at least some of Stranger Things? Okay, a decent number of you. Those of you who haven't, I'll give you a little background. So Stranger Things starts in the early 80s, small town in Indiana, and these strange, seemingly supernatural type phenomena start taking place. There's this upside-down world that kind of breaks into our world. It seems like it's a hell state. There's these demogorgons that seem like they're demons. This is a Netflix show. They're like demons. And then there's this thing called the Mind Flayer that seems to possess Will, one of the characters. When you get to the season 4, they now take stuff we think is supernatural, like a haunted house and exorcisms. Then you get to the final season, there's this spinning, powerful thing that they describe as magic. But you know what they do in the movie? Systematically, they present in the show, they present things that you think are supernatural. One by one, explain them away naturally. If you watch carefully, that's what Stranger Things does. Even 11, this character that seems to have supernatural powers, is more like the X-Men that have unexplained psychic powers than Doctor Strange, who has real supernatural powers. Thank you. Somebody agrees. Preach it. I'm not saying you shouldn't watch Stranger Things. That's a separate conversation. I'm saying what this show does is very intentionally subverts a traditional theistic Christian worldview in which there's a supernatural realm, demons actually exist, haunted houses can be real if you mean demonic supernatural power. People can be demonically oppressed, and they explain it away. In fact, in season 4, they even have a Satan-type figure that's known as Vecna. But in season 5, one of the kids goes, remember, Vecna is just a man. You think that's accidental? This story is a naturalistic story subverting a supernatural narrative. Now, we can come back if you want my 2 cents on what we should watch or what we shouldn't watch. That's a separate conversation. But Stranger Things gives the impression that it's a supernatural tale, but it subverts it one by one. You know another movie that's a little bit more dated, but the Sherlock Holmes film from 2009, if you remember that, with Morton Downey Jr., or not Morton Downey Jr., that was his dad, Robert Downey Jr. One by one, there's these supernatural phenomena, including a resurrection. But then what Sherlock Holmes can do is explain it away carefully through science and through like illusions rather than the supernatural being real. That's what we mean by naturalism. So let me give you another example. This is a movie that came out, The Theory of Everything. Some of you remember this movie about Stephen Hawking, one of the great scientists over the past half century. He had, I think, Lou Gehrig's disease, which just affected his body and his voice. At the end of the movie, he's sitting there and he's asked a question by a character who's playing the role of Richard Dawkins, an outspoken atheist. And listen very carefully, because now at the end of the movie, he kind of preaches what his philosophy of life is. Now, actually, I'll leave it right there. Listen very carefully, and I think you'll get the point. Here we go.
You have said you do not believe in God. Do you have a philosophy of life that helps you?
It is clear that we are just an advanced breed of primates on a minor planet, orbiting around a very average star in the outer suburb of one among 100 billion galaxies. But ever since the dawn of civilization, people have craved for an understanding of the underlying order of the world. There ought to be something very special about the boundary conditions of the universe. And what can be more special than that there is no boundary? And there should be no boundary to human endeavor. We are all different. However bad life may seem, there is always something you can do and succeed at. While there is life, there is hope.
Did you catch that? This is an atheistic worldview in which they're still trying to give us what? Hope, exactly. He starts off and goes, yeah, there's no God. We're in a random planet and we evolved. But while there's life, there's hope. And did you notice in the movie, some of their heads were tilted, they were leaning in, there's inspiring music. They're appealing to our hearts and our feelings and our relationships to get us to believe you can have a meaningful life if there is no God. That's called existentialism. Now, I want to show you a different take on naturalism. There was a play by Samuel Beckett called Breath. This was in the middle of the 20th century. And this is like a YouTube 90-second rendition of it. People would actually get dressed up. They would go to major theaters to watch this, and the whole play, I think, was 2 or 3 minutes long. And what would happen is some of the critics were like, this is brilliant, and talked about how amazing it is. Now, I'm going to show it to you. I want you to watch it. Then I'm going to ask you what you observe and what you think is maybe going on. Are you ready? Actually, you think you're ready. There's no way you could quite be ready for this, but here we go. Watch closely. This is naturalism. Got it? That's it. All right, flip the lights on there for me. Speaking of lights, anybody have any idea what just happened and how this is naturalism? That actually was a story. It just told a story without words. That told a story. Any guesses? Okay, trash is important. Okay, life coming and going. Okay, good. Keep going. Okay, so there's an overview. Life comes and it goes. Okay. Now, is this about an individual life, or is this kind of about the macro view of life? I think it's the macro view. Why? Because in the beginning, how does this start? Completely black. There's no sound. There's no light, nothing exists. And then what happens? Then just this breath appears. At the same time, you have light and trash floating through whatever space. Now, what kind of breath is it? It's a staggered, graspy, like struggling. Life is a struggle. It's like a Darwinian struggle. Is this on a purposeful trajectory, or is it just kind of wandering aimlessly through space? Okay, so we're not to Genesis yet. Hang on. You're like 3 steps ahead of me. I like you. Slow down. It's aimlessly. It's not purposely going there. It's aimlessly. And why trash? So partly chaos. There's no order that's there, but it's worthless. So in the beginning, there's nothing. And then somehow light comes out of nowhere. It's unexplained. There's this phenomena aimlessly and purposely going through space. There's this jarring breath that just emerges. It's unexplained. And then the life goes away, the light goes out, and it disappears. This is basically the story of reality if there is no God. There was nothing, and then there's something. There was no light, and then there's light. There's things that exist for some unknown reason, but it doesn't have intrinsic worth or value. It wasn't created good, and it's going to die out at some point. Now, this isn't the hopeful, cheery, there's no God, you have hope, your life counts, make a difference. This is a little bit more of a stark, 30,000-foot view that should make anybody pause and say, wait a minute, how do I fit into this story? You know how you fit in? You're what? You're a piece of trash. I'm a piece of trash on this story. This is more what would be called nihilism. If there's no God, there's no life after death. There's no real meaning to the universe. There's no right and wrong. There's no human value. Go. 5 producers listed. I mean, that took some thought and time. This was a number of years ago. Now you could probably do it with AI in 30 seconds, who knows? But this is, do you see how this is the naturalistic story? Yes. That's an interesting point. So I think this is raising the question, wait a minute, if light came from, where did that light come from? Just appear? Is that an adequate explanation? Breath? Did that just appear from trash? Like, where did this thing start? What gave it the energy to move through space? It's not making us ask these questions, but we naturally do. And you're right, it's reminiscent of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He creates breath, he creates life, but he makes the world good. Do you see they didn't make trash? Humans made trash. Do you see the contrasting stories here? I think, what do you think? I'm going to ask this and let it sit. What is the more consistent naturalistic story? The Stephen Hawking, hey, we evolved, we're here for a minute, there's hope, there's life, there's goodness. Your life matters. Or this second one, light's going out, breath is going to stop, you're trash. I think that second one is so stark, we can't embrace it. So we got to distract ourselves. We got to give ourselves meaning. We got to act as if what we do makes a difference. Because if that second story is true, the reality is it doesn't matter. Lights are going out. Life is going to stop, and there is nothing you can do about it. That is the stark reality of the naturalist worldview. Now, naturalism is expressed in secular humanism. Marxism is a kind of naturalist worldview. There are certain Buddhist worldviews that are naturalistic. Some of critical theory is naturalistic. But it is one of the more influential belief systems. You see it pretty firmly in a lot of disciplines in the university. I'm speaking tonight at Texas Tech, by the way. If you want to come, would love to have you, or you know students. But I would about guarantee you, and I haven't really done any research there at all, that you would see a strong influence of naturalism in different departments at Texas Tech as you would other universities. Now, the second big worldview is what we call pantheism. Pan means what? All. We had a pandemic almost 6 years ago now. It's kind of amazing. Very different than an epidemic. An epidemic is a localized breakout. A pandemic is what? Pan means all, everywhere, like global. So AIDS was more of a pandemic, that's for sure. So pantheism means what? All is God. All is divine. All is interconnected as a part of this divine energy essence, so to speak. Pantheism, all is God. Now what follows from this, if all is God, then distinctions are really artificial. So this is sometimes called monism. All is one. So there's really no distinction between me and you, mind and matter, right and wrong. All is one is a part of this pantheism. We also call it on a popular level what? Call it New Age. And as we're going to talk about in a little bit, New Age is kind of coming back in our culture. So where did the world come from? Humans, the creation, humans are part of the eternal divine consciousness. Now, who could tell me why there's not a creation moment for New Age? Why is there not a creation moment? Because there's not what? There's not a creator. How does the Bible start? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We could talk for an hour about that. That tells us God self-exists. God is supreme over creation. God is separate from creation. and he's the one who brought it into existence. He is the author of life. In New Age, there's no distinction between creator and creation. All is one. So you can't have a creation moment if there's no distinct creator to speak it into existence. So hence the universe is eternal, it's always been here, and we're a part of the God consciousness. Now what's gone wrong in the world is we've forgotten that we are divine, or we have failed to tap into this divinity that exists within the world itself. Now if the problem is forgetting, what's the solution? Remember, whatever the problem is, our solution, if it's going to work, must reflect that problem. So again, Marxism, the core problem in the world are haves and have-nots. So if we make everything equal and we all have the same possessions, you will have an equal, beautiful, wonderful life. The problem is that doesn't get to the heart of what's wrong in the world. On New Age, they're saying the problem is we haven't tapped into our inner divinity and we've forgotten we're divine. So some of you remember an actress by the name of Shirley MacLaine, probably a couple of generations ago. She would say, look in the mirror every morning and say this 3 times, I am God, I am God, I am God. Now, if that's not heresy, I don't know what is, but that's the reflection of a certain worldview. You have God within you. You need to be reminded about it. Look within for that strength and that transformation. So the solution, of course, redemption, become one with the universe through remembering and through other spiritual practices that connect you with reality. Now I'm going to show you a clip from I'm going to take you back to the early 80s. So we have Stranger Things, which is mimicking the early 80s, and then a movie from actually the early 80s. Listen to the worldview behind what Yoda is teaching Luke Skywalker. Here we go.
I can't. It's too big.
Size matters not. Look at me. Judge me by my size, do you? And where you should not. For my ally is the Force. And a powerful ally it is. Life creates it. Makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us. And binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you. Here, between you, me, the tree, the rock, everywhere. Yes, even between the land and the ship.
You want the impossible.
All right, you get the point. They're basically preaching at us, right? Not this fleshly, physical matter. That's not what's real. It's the underlying spiritual essence that is real. By the way, in Star Wars, there's not 2 forces. There's one force with 2 sides that unites really everything. It's interesting that Stranger Things is science fiction, but it's naturalistic. Star Wars is science fiction, but it's got pantheism wedded into it. Of course, we see this even further in shows like Moana and Pocahontas and the Avatar series. If you've seen the first Avatar, that's basically a 3-hour sermon on New Age, not to mention the evils of government and worshiping nature. That's a sermon. What happens is when we watch TikTok or we watch Netflix or we watch movies, we think we're just kind of being entertained. And so our defenses go down. When you're listening to a sermon in church, you know someone's preaching at you. When you watch a political, an aspiring politician or an existing politician given a speech, you know this politician is speaking politics to you. But when we watch a movie and television, what happens? Our defenses go down, and we think we're just being entertained. But we're seeing stories lived out in relationship that forms and shapes our worldview. That's why Plato said, "He who tells the stories of a society rules that society." If I want to know a lot about you, I would want to know the key people in your life who have shaped you, because that's your relationships. But I also want to know, what are the stories that you tell yourself about reality? My favorite Bible story, and I would go on a limb to say it's objectively the best Bible story, is David versus Goliath. I love that story. And somehow I've always resonated and connected with it, and it shapes the way I see the world. I'm always like, well, the underdog can find a way and win. Well, that's not always true, but I love that story so much. It shaped my worldview. By the way, Goliath was not 9 feet tall. Goliath was 6'9". I'm dead serious. Don't believe me? I released a video this week. It's only 10 minutes, and I make a case that the 3 earliest manuscripts we have, Dead Sea Scrolls, Septuagint, and the writings of Josephus, long before the text that most of our Bible is made on, has a height that would be 6'9" for Goliath rather than 9 feet tall, and it makes the story better. But you're going to have to watch it if you want, or bring it back in Q&A time. Beside the point. The point we're talking about here is our stories that we watch, the stories we listen to, shape our belief system and shape our lives. They shape the way that we live. Now, of course, Christianity, which you understand, is a story. It's a story. But it's a story, as we're going to see today, is the true story about reality. And of course, it starts with, in the beginning, God created. And after lunch, we're going to look at some of the evidence that God really created. What's wrong with the world on the Christian story? Sin. We've rebelled against God, and we've been corrupted as a result of it. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So worldviews like Marxism think the problem is out in the world, and if we fix things externally, we'll have peace and prosperity and unity. Jesus said, nope, it's not out there, it's in here. And what's the solution? Everybody on 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, like half of you got it. If you don't know the answer to a question in church, just say Jesus. For God so loved the world, gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. By the way, quick story, and then we'll take questions, we'll take a break, is my son, gosh, he's now 13. When he was in kindergarten, that's when you learn to raise your hand and not blurt out answers. And so the teacher was saying, okay, class, I'm going to ask you a simple question. Raise your hand, give an answer. She said, class, what's gray, has a big bushy tail, and climbs in trees? None of my Sunshane's classmates raised their hand. He said, class, you raise your hand if you have an answer, and I call on you. What's gray, has a big bushy tail, and climbs in trees? Nothing. She said, class, I know you know this. You put your hand up like this, I call on you, then you give the answer. That's how we have order in the class. What's gray, has a big bushy tail, and climbs in trees? One of my Sunshane's classmates, little Johnny, he raised his hand. He goes, yes, Johnny. He said, I'll say Jesus, but it sure sounds like a squirrel to me. Jesus is the root of the answer of the Christian worldview, and obviously the greatest hope for the world. Now, we have time for a few questions. We're going to take a break. Clarifications, challenges. We can use a mic, or you can be loud and I can repeat it. Do you have that mic? Because you have a question, Josh, right? Did I remember that? We can run around, or you can just state it. This is not the time for a long speech, but yes, go ahead.
Just talking about stories, a few years ago, it was really prevalent. There were just a lot, like the movie Armageddon, the The Walking Dead, there was just this persistent theme in shows and movies of resurrection, and it always being an evil force that human, underdogs would overcome. And I just wondered how that fits in. Had you noticed that? Just the theme of resurrection and it being a bad thing that humanity had to overcome.
This is an interesting question. I don't know that I interpret zombies so much as resurrection, because The Walking Dead are about zombies. I think you start to see zombies. Reading something about this not long ago. It's kind of tied to this idea that we've lost our humanity. It's almost like we're present, but we're not present, and we're just going through the motions. So one of the earlier zombie movies, I can't remember if it was the 60s, 70s, or 80s, was about how zombies take over a mall. And it's kind of given a social commentary of like, are we all just zombies buying things and selling things and describing ourselves as, or acting in a way zombie does, and not really being human in the way that we're supposed to. So I think zombies are somewhat a commentary on the breakdown between fiction and reality, the loss of our humanity, and just what it means to just go through the motions and not really have agency in your life and do anything that's meaningful. I think that's kind of from my quick take on it. I haven't done a deep dive on zombies, but I think there's a sense of like, are they human? Are they not human? The Walking Dead, one of the creators of that, Robert Kirkman, is an atheist. I'm trying to get an interview with him. I would absolutely love it because that show is really gritty, but it raises interesting questions. Like in the show, one of the heroes' daughter becomes a zombie. So he keeps her in this shed with others alive. Is she still human? Is there a soul? What does it mean to be human? Like these are really interesting moral questions that zombie films can ask, even though they are gory by their very nature. So that's my take on it. You see like Dracula vampire stories emerge when we're able to medically do like blood transfusions. So you see these vampire stories start to emerge. What does it mean to be human? Is blood a part of our life? Why would somebody take our blood and they become the villains? Like there's just always interesting reasons these kind of stories emerge at a certain time. So that's my take, although there could be much more to it. Questions, thoughts? Yes? Mm-hmm.
Then it blurs over into explaining miracles in a naturalistic way, like you were talking about. For instance, like the Red Sea, when the Israelites went through the Red Sea.
Yeah.
And people trying to explain it naturally instead of discounting the fact that it was a miracle.
Great question. I don't think it's naturalistic elements or a miracle, because sometimes God operates through naturalistic elements. So, good question. So, I'm getting there through the back door. When we blur like how science explains things and through supernatural miracles, is this taking science too far? When people use science to try to point towards God, but then do we undermine God by explaining away certain miracles? Biblically, in Exodus 14, when it splits the Red Sea, it says God sends, an eastward wind. I still think that qualifies as a miracle because the size of that wind, the location and timing of that still moves beyond, oh my goodness, we're here, we're trapped, they're chasing us, and there happens to be a wind in this place at this time to save us, and then it closes in over the, Egyptians. So God can and does use natural means at times, and I think it's okay to point to that. We just have to be careful to say what we mean by a miracle is not like, a miracle save in volleyball. Whoa, she dove and saved that. That's a miracle. No. A parking space during Christmas at the mall to get a gift, awesome, probably not a miracle. A miracle is a supernatural act of God that can't be explained away naturally. It points beyond itself. So if science can explain some of that, or God uses some natural means, there's still a sense of the timing and location and power that goes beyond the means of science that points towards the supernatural. That's really the key. All right, we have time for one more quick question. If you have one, if not, you can write it down. We can come back to it. So let me do this. When we come back, we're going to give a foundational talk like, okay, I see what different worldviews are. I see what's at stake with naturalism, pantheism, Christianity. Where do we start building a Christian worldview? We didn't have to do this 30, 40 years ago, but we do today is talk about what is truth, how do we know truth, is there even such a thing as truth? You'll hear people say, well, that might be true for you, but not true for me. Well, that's my truth. As if truth, when it comes to God and the big questions of life, is a matter of subjectivity. It's one of my favorite talks to give, and I think it'll be eye-opening for you with clarity of what truth is, how to find it, how to know it. Then after lunch, we're going to come back, and we're going to start to make a case for the theistic worldview actually being true. So I'm going to give you 7 evidences, you might say, that God is back, and then we're going to apply it specifically to the LGBTQ conversation, in a particular the transgender topic. And you can't get to transgenderism without first establishing that there is such a thing as objective truth that should guide the way that we live. That's really the discussion when it comes to the transgender topic. Is there objective truth built into our bodies that we discover and conform our lives to? Or do we change our bodies to fit how we feel and expect the rest of us to come along? That's a question about truth. So that's where we're headed. Come back at, let's go 10:45. I think we're okay if we push to 10:45. That'll give you 18 minutes. Why don't you guide us, give us important instructions. I'm going to sneak to the back. Oh, I didn't show you, if this is helpful. Come to think of it. I won't take too much time here. But I told my dad's story. He wrote a book called More Than a Carpenter. And he actually wrote it in McDonald's in Chicago. Never dreamed it would be 30 million in print. It's a short book that makes a case for Jesus, and we just updated it together just this past fall. One of the things I'd encourage you to think about doing is pick up 3 or 5 and give them out to people. My neighbor is a brilliant doctor, and she lost her husband. I was like, I wonder if she'd read more Carpenter. I gave myself every excuse. Finally gave it to her. She read it, sent my wife the sweetest text ever, and was like, this is what I needed. It makes sense. I'm going back to church. And I was like, I'm the author of this book, and I almost did give it away for 5 excuses. So for yourself, but think about for some believers grabbing some. The book, A Rebel's Manifesto, is actually, this talk is one of the chapters. What is a worldview? Why is it important? How do we understand it? There's a whole chapter in there on how to engage media thoughtfully. We didn't really have time to go into that. I picked the 20 to 25 thorniest issues: transgender, race, artificial intelligence, short chapters. How can we think about these, especially for young people? So if you have a young person in your life, if you are a young person, you want to understand their mind, that A Rebel's Manifesto would help you out. And then the book, So the Next Generation Will Know, really tied to your question. How do we pass this stuff on to the next generation? We're not spending a lot of time on this today, but it's important we take this information and say, what does it look like with our kids? What does it look like with our grandkids? That's what this book would be. So if you buy the 2, we throw More Than a Carpenter in there for free for you. I'm going to sneak back there. 10:45, I just used 3 minutes of your break, so now you have 16 minutes. We'll see you back there. Let me grab my phone.
Thanks, Sean. Just for those of you who are not acquainted, the men's bathroom that is closest to us is through those doors there. The women's is through those doors there. Have a good break. We'll see you in a few minutes.